Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and recently there's been a lot of talk about how this crisis might change the fabric of British society, so I thought I'd throw my own hat into the ring, so to speak. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, although the makeup of society generally acts against change, sometimes events happen that massively reorder things. For example, a century ago, the First World War had a profound effect on not only the class system in the UK, but it also meant that women entered a workforce normally forbidden to them, a matter of necessity with so many men overseas. And when you have to reorder things during a crisis, they can never really go completely back to the way they were. Things that we were told were impossible were done. So they're not impossible anymore. So why can't some of them continue to be done? But such changes as a result of crisis don't always yield results for the better, of course. There are people arguing quite strongly that there will be opportunities when this crisis is over, but that people need to be ready. There is one group of people that will absolutely be ready. They are always ready. The greedy, obnoxious capitalists who own the world right now will absolutely be ready to push their own agenda further. They will argue that the NHS failed because of its publicly funded model. You need a private insurance, old chap, they will say. That was always the long-term goal for the Conservatives. Publicly back the NHS as a vital institution, say that you're pumping billions and billions into it, but undermine it with a lack of staff and resources and smoke and mirrors and impose upon it inefficient systems. That way, you get to say that you are pumping those billions into a sinking ship and that it's the funding model that's the problem. And we have to be ready to shine a spotlight on the lies of this. We need to point to the American citizens who are people of the richest country on earth being denied medical treatment when they contracted the virus because their private insurance doesn't cover it, or they didn't have private insurance. We need to point out how last year an American citizen who injured her leg very, very badly on a train platform told bystanders not to call an ambulance because she couldn't afford it. People will say that we're getting a newfound respect for the workers who really matter. For the supermarket workers, for nurses, for paramedics. All people that the government described as unskilled just a month ago. It turns out that we can't live without the person who ensures that there are trolleys at Tesco's. But we can live without hedge fund managers. Turns out we do need experts. What we don't need are the horseshit peddlers. But when this is all over and life returns to what people will recognise as normality, there's a decent chance it'll all be forgotten. They were necessary in an emergency, they will say. But this is a once-in-a-century emergency, and I'm not going to be around for the next one, so hooray for the hedge fund managers draining away the health and wealth of the nation. Ultimately, society will not learn any lessons from this without them being pointed out. The right will attempt to teach us the lessons that they want us to learn. They are highly organised and effective at doing so. They will need to be challenged with equally powerful voices pointing out the lies. The party that said that the country couldn't afford Labour spending plans, for example, is showing that can actually afford much, much more. The party that said that we need to stop low-paid migrants coming to work in the UK are having to put on flights to bring in more people from around the world. And the party that said that we could do things better on our own than as part of an international group is demonstrating just how impotent we can be if we elect isolationist clowns into power. But of course, that is not the message that Boris Johnson will want us getting out, and he has emergency powers now. Boris Johnson effectively has two potential enemies to beware of. There are those who will oppose his government and his party and his politics. That is a given. It's what we call an opposition. So far, he has had no effective opposition in that regard. The hope is that we are only a day or two away from that changing. But he also has enemies within. While his credibility holds in the Conservative heartlands, he need not fear. He is the leader of the party, and he is backed by the party. The second that Boris Johnson becomes a liability, the second that the criticisms outweigh the plaudits, the Conservative Party will jettison him. Johnson has benefited from this instinct himself, and it is what ultimately will finish him off. There are some who just know when it's their time to leave and leave. He's too much of an egomaniac. He won't relinquish power when his time will come. He will have to be forced out of office at some point. It may be years into the future. It may be next year. Who knows? The question is, when? And it will be sooner if the opposition can shine a bright spotlight onto his dangerous behaviour. Finally, another change that we are seeing is the middle classes having first-hand experience of the benefit system. All those people who poured scorn on others who were unfortunate enough to be unemployed, calling them scroungers and parasites. Well, they are now amongst that number. They are seeing just how inhuman the system is, how unfair it is, how stacked against them it is. Will that change attitudes when it's done? Again, only if a conversation is had about it. Otherwise, it'll just be another example of the great emergency that resets life back to how it was afterwards. So the potential exists, I think, for society to change for the better, but also for the worse, or to not change at all. Conservatives are pretty good at divide and rule, highly practiced at blaming nebulous groups for their failings. If the corona measures don't work, it won't be their cack-handed response, it will be the individuals who didn't comply with the rules. If your granny doesn't get NHS treatment, it will be because of the physicist who got magnets stuck up his nose. Whatever goes wrong, there will be others to blame for it, and nowhere near enough people will think twice about voting again for a man who, when you gave him overwhelming power, spent the next few months complaining about how powerless he was. But there it is. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.